In Brazil, the opponents of President Dilma Rousseff say they have the support needed to form an opposition government. Plus, here in Venezuela, the opposition says it has collected the signatures needed to put Nicolas Maduro under a recall referendum. Thanks so much for joining us. For teleSur's English, I'm Coddy Weddle, and this is from the South. In Brazil, the Brazilian right-wing Social Democratic Party has formally sealed an alliance with the Movement for Democracy Party. The right-wing PSDB leader, Aécio Neves, who has led the opposition against President Dilma Rousseff and has contested the results of the 2014 general elections, he met with former president and PMDB leader Fernando Henrique Cardoso. Neves and Cardoso confirmed that a government led by Vice President Michel Temer, who would take the presidential seat if President Rousseff is impeached, will count with the backing of the PSDB. During a public event, President Rousseff reacted to the announcement, calling the impeachment process an indirect election.
This
is not an impeachment process. This is really an indirect election hidden behind the legality of the impeachment. It's an indirect election because it is led by those who did not get enough votes in the last elections, in the polls in which people vote.
Meanwhile, the Senate Commission analyzing the impeachment process against Rousseff continued amid heated debates. The governing Workers' Party refuted the reasons behind the process, which the opposition has shifted throughout the process. The accusations have shifted between trying to link Rousseff to the Petrobras corruption scandal and blaming her for mishandling the government's accounts. Venezuelan opposition says it has gathered enough signatures for a recall referendum against President Nicolas Maduro. And President Nicolas Maduro has announced he will pass a decree to block the parliament's attempt to remove the Minister of Food Production. President Maduro said during a televised message that the decree will stop any attempt by the opposition to disrupt his cabinet. The head of state explained that in times when Venezuela is facing an electricity and economic crisis, forcefully changing his cabinet could sabotage the government's efforts. The state of Guerrero in Mexico, where almost 2 years ago 43 students were forcibly disappeared, is now once again the center of attention. At least 100 protesters have been reported disappeared after the local transport workers union launched a strike, paralyzing one of Mexico's main roads. The transport workers are demanding better infrastructure and were joined by local residents who were protesting insecurity. Late in the afternoon, federal police agents abruptly disrupted the protests, making several arrests. The protesters' relatives are demanding the national government to intervene immediately as they believe the mayor could be behind their disappearance. Argentina's main workers' unions marched today in Buenos Aires against government policies. According to the organizers of the march, some 300,000 workers joined the protest. Over 10,000 public and private sector workers have been laid off during Mauricio Macri's presidency. Now, the march comes a day after the Senate approved a law to freeze layoffs nationwide until next year. And university teachers are camping outside of Argentina's Congress in Buenos Aires. The teachers launched the strike due to cuts made on the education budget passed by the government, led by President Macri. The Constitutional Court of Colombia has rejected numerous appeals made by judges who resist gay marriage implementation there. The Constitutional Court ruling comes as many local judges have refused to officialize the marriage of same-sex couples. Through this ruling, which is unappealable, the gay movement has achieved another victory in the battle for LGBT equality. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez met with his British counterpart Philip Hammond in Havana on Thursday. It was the first time a British foreign secretary has traveled to Cuba since the 1959 Cuban Revolution. The two ministers signed several cooperation agreements and agreed to strengthen commercial ties. The UK minister said his country supports Cuba in its efforts to end the U.S.-imposed economic blockade. 33 lions will be sent to a wildlife refuge in South Africa after being rescued from traffickers while being transported in Colombia. The lions and other circus animals will be delivered to the refuge by the governments of Peru and Colombia as part of their efforts to stop wild animal trafficking. Animal protection organizations have backed the efforts and are taking care of those animals. According to the Pentagon, a U.S. airstrike that destroyed a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Afghanistan was not a war crime. However, the military took disciplinary action against 16 service members that were involved in the attack, which killed 42 people and wounded 37 others. It comes after the findings of a U.S. military investigation into the incident, which broadly concluded that the strike was a tragic mistake.
In light of the report's conclusion that the errors committed were unintentional, and after considering other mitigating factors such as the intense combat situation and equipment failures that affected the mission, from a senior commander's perspective, the measures taken against these individuals were appropriate to address the errors they made.
Syrian government airstrikes have hit 3 clinics in rebel-held districts of Aleppo, that according to rescue workers. One strike in the neighborhood of Al-Marja wounded several people, including at least 1 nurse. No deaths were reported after those attacks. The trial of 94-year-old former Auschwitz guard Reinhold Hanning continued in Germany, where he apologized to Nazi victims in court. Now, Hanning is accused of participating in the murder of at least 170,000 people. He has said he knew what was going on at the camp, but did not act to stop it. However, he denies involvement in murder. The United Nations Security Council has voted to restore the UN mission in Western Sahara. However, it was divided over the steps demanded from Morocco to bring the peacekeeping force back to full operations. The decision comes after Morocco expelled international civilian staff in March. That was over Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's use of the term occupation when he referred to the status of the territory Morocco claims as its own. A judge has ruled that South Africa's President Jacob Zuma should face corruption charges. The charges were dropped just weeks before elections in 2009, which led to Zuma becoming president. The judge said the decision to drop the charges was irrational. The case was brought to the court by the opposition party, the Democratic Alliance.
He's maintained that the decision to drop charges against Jacob Zuma was irrational and should not have been discontinued, and we welcome the fact that those charges must be continued and Jacob Zuma must have what he's always wanted, his day in court.
South Sudan has formed a unity government in a bid to restore peace to the war-torn country. The president has split 30 cabinet posts between his government and opposition factions. Despite the formation of the unity government, fighting there does continue. North Korea has sentenced a detained Korean American to 10 years in prison after he was found guilty of subversion and espionage. Now, he was abducted in North Korea in October and later admitted to stealing military secrets. State prosecutors sought a 15-year sentence. His defense attorney requested leniency considering his age. He is 62. 11 dead bodies have been recovered after a helicopter carrying 13 people crashed off of western Norway. 2 bodies are yet to be found after a major search was launched after the crash. Those 2 people are presumed dead. Norway's Civil Aviation Authority has imposed a flight ban on the type of helicopter that crashed, the Eurocopter EC-225L Super Puma, as it's called. Check this out, a huge anti-Trump protest took place outside of the California GOP convention. The protesters, many of them younger people, surged toward the hotel, confronting police at the front and side doors. Scuffles between the police and the protesters took place, with some of them throwing eggs at the officers. Suspended UEFA chief Michel Platini appeared at the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland to appeal his 6-year ban for ethics violations. Platini said he was more optimistic of having the ban overturned after the hearing. CAS Secretary General Matteo Reebok said that a decision would be made by the panel of 3 judges and is expected in 10 days. Preparations have begun in Cuba to host the Channel Cruise 2017 presentation on May 3rd. It will be the first runway show the French fashion house will stage on the island and in all of Latin America. a photo exhibition titled Work in Progress. Work in Progress by Chanel's creative director, Carl Ladgerfield, was inaugurated on April 28th in a central gallery of Old Havana. And that's what we're covering on this Friday. Thanks so much for joining us. We have plenty more on all of those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. Be sure to join us as well on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Have a great weekend.